to our channel, that is AI next generation. In the previous video we already have been seen about how to create the object and how to create the class in the oops, and also we have just seen introduction to the Python, introduction to the oops in the Python, where we have just seen various type of approach. We are just going to already we have just covered this all, that is procedural approach, whether it is a functional approach or whether it is object oriented approach. And also we have covered how to create the class and how to create the object or instance of that particular class, what is attribute and what is behavior. This all thing we have covered till now. But in for this particular video we are going to see about the constructor in the Python and also the self keyword. What is the use of the self keyword in the oops? Okay, so what do you mean by constructor in the Python? If you are coming from the Java language or C++ language, you already know about the constructor. Whenever you are just creating the object of any class, the what attribute or what parameter you are just passing in the constructor, you have to just pass whenever you are just creating the object of that particular class. Okay, so we will see this thing in more detail whenever we will do the coding part. So first of all, what you have to just define here, first of all we are going to see, first of all just define, we are just creating one class, that is a employee class. Clear? We are just creating the employee class. Then after you have to just define in a special type of method. So that is in Python you have to define dot init underscore dot double underscore dot double underscore init double underscore. Okay, just remember this one, double underscore init double underscore means you are just defining the constructor for the Python. You are defining the oops constructor. Okay, so the thing is that in the Python there is no such kind of constructor, but this behave as it is like a constructor. So what you are just defining here, you are just defining first of all init method, and here you are just passing the what variable or what attribute you want to pass, that is a particular parameter. The first parameter you are just passing, that is a self. So now we are just concentrating what do you mean by self keyword. So self basically refers to the that particular instance or that particular object. Whenever you are just creating the n number of object, every object will have the different reference. So if for every object you are just passing different variable, different parameter for that, and how this can be referenced to this particular with the help of self keyword, how to give the reference to the instance or the object with the help of self. Okay, for that particular object we are going to see more depth about the how you are just creating the object. At that time you will see how in the position of self what you are just passing. Okay, suppose I'm just taking the simple example. In the init method you are just passing self keyword, and then after you are just passing the name of the employee, and then after the particular you can just say the email ID. I can just say not an email ID, I can just give the ID of the employee, and then after you are just passing particular how much pay he is getting. Okay, this is the random stuff I'm just passing. Clear? Then after that what you're just saying, you have to just pass the cell, that is the self, name, ID and pay. Then after that you have to initialize this name and ID, pay and self dot name equal to name. This is the thing, you are just initializing the name, you are just giving the name keyword. You can just give anything name. Okay, you are just giving self dot name so that you can just give reference to that particular object. That's why self is basically used to give the reference to that particular instance. Just be remember this one. Okay, instance or object, whatever I'm just speaking, they both are same. It is basically it will give you the reference to that particular object. Okay, self dot name, then again you are just initializing to self dot id equal to id, and again you just initializing self dot pay equal to pay. Clear? I don't think so you have doubt in this till now. So you are just creating the init method for that, and then after you are just passing the 4 parameter, that is self, name, id and pay. Clear? Now if you are just creating the object of that class, suppose this is the ABC, the first employee is the ABC, and after that you are just creating the object of that, that is the defining the taking the class. And here what parameter you have to pass, the first parameter self. You don't have to pass the value of the self, here you have to pass the 3 parameter what you have just given, that is the name, the ID and the pay. Clear? So here just you are just passing the name as a, you can just give, you are just passing as a Piyush. Okay, you are just passing the name as a Piyush, and then after you are just passing you are just passing the ID, you are just passing an ID as 123, and pay he's getting as a, you can just say 50,000. Okay, now clear? You are just passing for the ABC. So how you are just giving the reference to that, even you can just write here Piyush for that, employee 1 or Piyush, you can just say employee 1, this is the employee 1. And again for the employee 2 you are just passing, you are just taking the employee, and again you are just passing something Ram. Okay, you are just passing the Ram, and after again the ID of that is you can just say 101, and the pay he is getting as 80,000. Okay, You are this way you are just passing. Now you are just getting the two object for that, two instance of this particular employee, and then after you are just passing. But in the it is here you, whenever you are just creating the constructor, also I have just forget to say you about the constructor, why you are passing this type of variable here. So whenever you are just creating the object of that particular class, whenever you are just creating the object of this employee class, so automatic this constructor, that is the init method, is invoked by default. This init method is invoked, that is the constructor. Means whenever you are just creating, whenever you are just creating the object of this particular class, that is the employee class, so by default what will be there? By default init method, that is a constructor, will invoke, okay, invoked, means that will be called, okay, by default. You don't have to call the init method separately. So what you are just saying, you are just created the class, and then after that you are just define the constructor for this particular class. So whenever you are just creating the object of this particular class, okay, that is employee 1, so you are just by default this particular init method is called by default. It come hands on hand with the, whenever you are just creating the object of this particular employee. So what parameter the init take, you have to pass here the parameter. But here you have just passed the to 4 parameter, that is the self parameter, the name parameter, the id and pay. But here you are just passing only 3 parameter, that is the name, id and pay. So where the self goes? So now I will explain you in the backend term. In the backend, so how you are just saying, in the backend term it go like this. So you don't have to pass the value of the self indirectly, it is passed as this one, employee 1 comma this one, and for this it has been passed employee 2 comma ram, this one. This way it is passing for the backend system. In the you don't have to pass for the self, automatic. What's the object name you are going to pass, that particular is passed whenever you are just creating the object of that particular class. Okay, you have just created the object of this employee 1. For first object you have created as employee underscore 1. So in position of self, it will pass as employee underscore 1, the first argument, and then after it will follow what argument you have passed. Okay, and then again for the employee 2, the first argument in the position of self, it will pass as employee 2, and then after you are going to pass the name, id and pay, so that you are giving the reference to that particular object. So that you are just saying that employee 1 holds the value as a Pius 123 and 50,000, employee 2 holds the value as a Ram 101 and 80,000. I think it's clear to you about the self, why we are using the self, so that you are giving the reference to that particular object, okay, with the help of self keyword. So in the backend you don't have to pass the self. Here you don't have to pass any value for the self. Automatic, what object name you are just defining for that particular class, automatic in backend system it goes like this. Okay, so the first parameter always you have to go for the self, then after followed by what parameter you are just passing. Clear? So here you are just passing this one, and again run this particular. So you are just creating the object of that, and then after you are just passing the value, and then after you are just passing the what particular parameter you have to pass. Okay, so this was about the constructor, and this was about the self. You already understand about the constructor. Constructor means whenever you are just creating the object of this particular class, automatic this particular method is invoked, that is that method, that is a double underscore init double underscore, that method will invoke by default. Okay, so and then after that you what parameter you are passing, here you have to pass the parameter whenever you are creating the object of that. And also in the position of self, you are just passing what it is passed. So self is basically give the reference to that particular object at that particular time. So for the particular employee 1, when in the backend system, it will pass as a first of all employee 1, then comma followed by all the 3 parameter, and second, and then also in the second object you are just creating as employee 2, and again in the backend system it will pass as a employee 2 comma ram, and then it followed by the 3 parameter. Okay, so I think it's clear to you. Again you are just creating one method. And how to define the one method? They are called instance variable. Okay, just be clear, because every time the name, id and pay will be different for every person. Okay, so that's it. They are called instance, means they are keep on changing, they give to reference to that particular object. They are called as a instance variable. Clear? These are called as instance variable. We are going to look again about the instance variable, instance method, class variable, class method in the next video. But here you have to understand they are called as instance variable. Okay, now you are just defining one method. How to define any method in that particular class? Any function inside, whenever you're defining any function inside the class, they are called as a method. Clear? So now you are just defining one method, that is, you can just say about the name and the id. You can just say, even you can just say about something, email address. You are just defining email address, and how you are just writing here. Then after it will just give you it will just return what you are going to return, self dot name, what is the name of that particular person, and then after you are just adding at the rate gmail.com. Okay, that's what you are just adding. You can just say at the rate something gmail.com, or you can just say that company name. Okay, you can now I'm just sticking to that gmail.com. Clear? So now you can just see whenever you are just creating the object of that, and now for the employee one, you are just employee one underscore one, and you are just calling this method, that is the email. Clear? And now you are just calling this method. So what in the backend system it will go? So you are just getting Piyush at the rate gmail.com. Clear? And again for the employee to, what you will get here, you are just calling this email, and then after again you are just running this one, and for employee 2 you are getting ram at the rate gmail.com. So you are just how to call any method. First of all you have to create the object of that, and from that particular object you have to call the method you are just going, because you have just creating the object of the employee. Okay, employee you have just creating the object, then after you are just calling this method. So what method it is there in the particular class, it can be called as employee one. You have to just give first of all object name, then after what method you want to call, you can call with dot email, and what parameter it is passing, you have to pass the parameter. Here we are just passing only self parameter, means in backend system it will go like this: employee, that is the employee one, and now employee one is holding Piyush 1 2 3 and 50,000. So you already know that in that's why self dot name it will goes, this employee one already know that their name is as a Piyush, and the ID and the pay for that. So this way you are just printing only the email ID for that. Even you can just create another method, that is a pay method. What pay you are just getting, okay, you are just what payroll you are just getting. So you can just do this way, and you are just returning self dot pay. Okay, you are just get what self dot pay, and again you can just call this method employee one underscore pay. This the pay method you have just defined, and call this method. Okay, then you are just getting this particular employee one dot pay. Sorry, I think I have just defined with the same name. You don't have to define, be clear. Okay, so you can't define the particular same name, the variable name, and that particular method as a same name. You can give define any other thing, my pay or something, employee pay, employee employee pay. Okay, and now you can just call employee underscore pay. Just be clear in this, you can't define the same name for the variable also, that is the instance variable or any method. The names will be different. Clear? So now you are just calling this method, and then you are just getting this 50,000. Clear? So this was about the constructor in the Python. This was about the self keyword in the Python, how to create a simple class in the Python. I hope you are clear with this. In the next class we are going to see different instance variable, class attribute, and different type of instance we are going to see in the next video. That's all for this video. Thank you.